Welcome everybody to the No Bullshit Gaming Podcast 2.5 Gamer session number 54. Okay, so we're sharing actionable insights, dropping knowledge from our day-to-day user acquisition, game design, and ad monetization jobs. Definitely not discussing the latest industry news, but we are having so much fun. Still, let's not forget this is 4 a.m. conference discussion vibe. Let's not take it too seriously. And today, this is a special episode again. We have a special guest. So we have the Mr. Eric Kress. Thanks for coming. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be part of the crew, right?
Yeah. So we just found out that Eric doesn't know about Jakub. He's on the podcast actually. So we have Jakub Remiar, we have Felix Braberg, and myself, Matej Lančarič. This is great. Jakub, you can do like a short intro to Eric so he knows. Who the fuck are you?
I do game design, product stuff for like 8 years now. Started in the industry because of VR, because that's my PhD in psychology when I was doing VR. And then pretty much switching to game design because game design is basically psychology. So pretty easy transition.
All right, well, give me a few games that you've done that I would know.
Battle Legion. I worked on that along.
Yeah, maybe.
All right. So you're like legit game developer. You're not like some person pretending.
I don't know.
Like
Like,
the rest of us.
No. Yeah. He's done some stuff at least in the past.
I worked on Battle Legion pretty much even before global launch for like 2 years with guys in Tampere, Finland.
Got it. What'd you do for VR?
It was like first at the beginning of the trend, we pretty much worked with Oculus, where we got the prototypes and did some kind of experimental, a Portal-like game called Collab, with like 5-hour puzzler, and then we need to switch it to Samsung Gear VR because of like the market broke down on like heavy VR devices then, and it broke down even more later down the line. But yeah, it was a interesting trip there at the VR trend.
Got it. You shifted right back. Yeah, it makes sense. VR is kind of dead or dying again, it seems.
Was it ever alive?
Oh, it was alive for a moment, dude. The Facebook, dude, just bring out the respirator, you know, and the paddles. Boom, 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 boom. You know, spent billions, and then what? Now it's dying again. You know.
Anyway.
This episode is called "Everything is Dead and Everybody Lies." So I guess
we're starting off good.
Yeah, pretty much.
Let me actually start off with the first question, and we can just kickstart it. Like, Eric, this glass right here, is it half full or is it half empty?
Well, if you're referring to the industries that we cover, I would say mobile is basically all the way empty, and console is almost all the way full. How about that? That's been my thesis for the last 18 months, and I think I'm sticking with it for the next 12 to 18 months until we figure out what the fuck Apple is going to do, and Google, and how publishers are going to respond. So, I think mobile is a shit show right now, and that should continue for at least another 2 years. So, it's a tough market.
Okay, but the main question is like, what the fuck you actually do on a daily basis? Because nobody knows.
What do you do, Eric? Yeah.
Except being on the podcast.
So I was actually preparing something for the Istanbul, because I'm doing the keynote for Istanbul for the Google / Deconstructor of Fun event. So I gave some thought as to how to introduce myself at that event, but I think I'll probably do a similar thing right now. It's like, one thing that's unique about me is that I am a pundit for the industry, but I don't really give a shit what does well and what doesn't do well. Right? My job fundamentally is to be right more than I'm wrong. Right? That's all I have to do. Okay. If I am right more than I'm wrong, I make money for my clients. Right? So my clients, I generally are hedge funds that trade the publicly traded names in the space. You know, EA, Activision, Take-Two, whatever, Unity, Roblox, whatever. And so I'm basically advising them on what I think is going to happen within the market, what products are going to do well, what platforms are going to do well. Yeah, who's going to succeed, who's going to fail, and just the overall dynamics of the industry itself. And I pride myself, generally speaking, on being a very good product person, like understanding what products are going to be successful, but also the reason why these products are going to be successful. So that's basically what I do. And then I also do consulting for industry. So for Warner, I did it for the last 3 years. doing product strategy for both mobile and console. And I did that for Kabam and I did that for EA. So I've been doing this stuff a long time, and that's kind of what I do. And so the big fundamental thing I want to get across is that I try to be as objective as possible. I have very strong opinions, but they're not like set in stone, and they change based upon the circumstances of what's happening, right? And so, and to be clear, I don't give a shit about mobile. I don't give a shit about console. I'm just trying to make the right calls here. All right, so that's how I'm gonna position myself at this point.
Okay, nice.
All
Oh yeah, by the way, the DOF Istanbul, it's happening next week. Well, I'm gonna publish this on Monday, I guess. So it's this week. So yeah, meet us all there. We're gonna be there. Eric's gonna be there. Felix, Jakub, me as well. I have a talk as well about IDFA and iOS. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Wow.
Oh yeah. we will get there. We'll get there. So yeah, definitely go attend. It's gonna be the event of this year, really. And last year was amazing,
It was
really
so
good.
good
Now
last
it's
year. Yeah.
now it's even bigger. So yeah, just
Yeah,
register.
I think they're more than doubling the capacity this year because less COVID restrictions. So yeah, it should be a pretty amazing event.
Yeah. Oh, looking forward really. And Istanbul is an amazing place. So yeah, register now. Maybe Mishka will let you in. Event. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, what are we talking about? So mobile is dead, right? Or like how does that look like? You mentioned it's kind of shitty, but is it though? Still, 2.5 or 6 billion people play mobile games.
I think look, mobile is a huge industry, and it's always going to be a big industry, right? Because everyone has a mobile phone, so it's not going away anytime soon, and it's just big, right? But I think it's just kind of going, and I've said in the podcast many times, it's like a Ragnarok right now because everything that worked before doesn't work anymore,
True.
right? So for the last 10 years, I've been saying this a million times, we've been optimizing around UA arbitrage and targeting whales, and that is no longer a viable option, right? In many ways.
Really?
Right. Yes. And Apple, I think, in general, destroyed the UA market for no fucking reason besides to promote and market their mobile phones, right? So privacy, as they define it, I don't think really the consumer cared that much. And even with the IDFA back then, I don't think that was like. I think that maintained privacy to some degree, right? Anyway,
I don't think that was an issue.
You don't think they did it to like Apple search ads to get that dominance?
No, I think that was an after effect of it. But I think that fundamentally, this is the way I've been looking at it, and this is the way I've been talking to a lot of people at Apple and others. Is that like it's basically the 6 people at top of Apple that run that company. Everyone else is just following, right? The tail wagging the dog type thing, right? These 6 people said that privacy is going to be our marketing message, and you see these fucking huge billboards on 101 and all over the world saying privacy, privacy, privacy. They want to sell that vision. And what do? They say, okay, well, let's remove the IDFA, the unique identifier that is closely keeping you private, right? Or keeping you unprivate or whatever. And so all it was a way of selling phones, right? To differentiate themselves from Google by removing something that was like absolutely a necessity for publishers, right? And these 6 people know fuck all about advertising or UA or publishing or gaming. They don't care about gaming at all. Like none of these like big tech companies care about gaming at all, right? All they care about is their corporate strategies. And that in that sense, their corporate strategy was to beat Google to the punch and create a great marketing message around privacy. To hell with everything else. So they make these changes. And it's pretty evident that this is the case because it was so ham-fisted how they did it, right? It took years for them to figure this shit out. Then they threw this thing out there and destroyed it like overnight. Like, dude, they have smarter engineers than that, I think. I don't know. You guys are the experts on this stuff, right? And it's because none of these guys, like this App Store guys, anybody that has to do any like interface at all with publishers had any idea what the hell is going on, right? They were just like waiting for the on high to get this communication. And so anyway, my big point is that like, again, they don't care about games. They put this thing into place, and it's basically completely upheaved the entire industry in the West in particular, right? Without user acquisition, which we've been optimizing for the last 10 years, it is freaking going to be a very, 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 very challenging market. And what worked before is not going to work going forward. That's kind of my whole
Machi
thesis
is
on
so
this whole
triggered.
series.
You can see how
that's
triggered
very
he-
true.
you can see
I'm
how
not
triggered he
triggered.
is.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not triggered. That's true because what was working before, it's not working anymore now, and it's not going to be working anymore. That's true. Everything else is like, you can still kind of target whales, but it's definitely difficult, and everything moved from this deterministic attribution to probabilistic. Whatever scan is here, and you can use it. And you can use it well, and if you use it well, then you can actually target whoever we want. It's just you're moving the targeting options from targeting whales in lookalikes, interest, whatever, to actually event-based targeting. So whatever events the players are doing in your game, you can track that and send it over back to Facebook, Google, TikTok, Unity, whatever. It's not easy. It's not easy to figure it out. Of course, it's hard. But then, you need to work with the product team to actually make it happen. And of course, with big companies, it's really hard because they're not flexible, they're not agile. They can't do a lot of A/B testing on the day one monetization. That's true. That's why, that's how and why the smaller teams always win on this iOS landscape, because they can change all the things very easily. Well, not very easily, but it's easier than the bigger companies. So it's not that, but it's hard, and it's not going to get any easier.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's the other challenge is this is only the beginning, right? So they remove fingerprinting. Google does whatever they're going to do, which is happening imminently. Fidelity is just going to be removed from the market, right? I mean, even you, who I know have been relatively.
I'm positive.
Oh,
yeah.
You're like kumbaya. We'll all figure this shit out type person. You drive me insane, by the way.
I know.
I just want to be clear on this, right? But even you have to admit the fidelity has been deteriorated just by what's happened so far, and it should be continued deteriorated going forward, right? So we are in a shittier position now than we were a year ago, and we will be in a shittier position 6 months from now than we are now.
100%. So, it's not going to get any better, of course. Okay. But it's going to change. It's going to change. Also, now the Scan 4.0, it's going to change. It's still super big uncertainty about the whole Scan 4.0. I had pretty good actually talk with the CTO of Singular about what's going to change with Scan 4.0.
When is that going to get implemented, by the way?
So it's adoption rate, yeah. So adoption rate right now, it's 40%. So as soon as the 16.1 iOS version came out, the Scan 4.0 was attached to that. So now it's 40% of people are actually having the 16.1. So I guess 80% of adoption rate will be in 3 or 4 months.
Oh, shit. So do you think that then they're going to go after fingerprinting after that?
Yeah, most probably. Yeah, that's going to take 3 months.
What the fuck happens? Iron Source, Unity, and AppLovin are fucking toast, right? I mean, what happens to those guys? All their advantages goes away.
Yeah, right? I can tell you on the iOS side, all these companies are doing fingerprinting 100%. The ECPM
100%,
Delta, ECPM deltas are so tiny in some cases in the US, and it's just maybe plus minus 13%. You're there's definitely fingerprinting going on there.
Yeah,
100%.
I mean, dude, they are just toast. Their stocks are already down 80%. It's gonna be. It's just. You would talk about Ragnarok. AppLovin and Iron Source and Unity are fucked. Right.
Let's go. Let's take the conversation there, because you've been very vocal about Unity and AppLovin.
I've been dead right. I've been dead right. You've been dead wrong, Mr. Mate. I fucking have been dead right about this, right? I mean, come on.
Wait. Can we just bring it back? Can you please just explain from your perspective, the story that they're trying to spin, and basically your perception of what's going on, just so we get both sides here.
Okay. Right. Let me just first by saying that Playtika just announced their earnings, right?
Yeah.
And they basically finally said, the secret out loud, right? It is impossible to bring new product to the market, right? And what my point is, has always been, is that AppLovin, Iron Source, Unity, Zynga, they've been gaslighting the entire industry and also investors on the impact of IDFA since the very beginning, right? They've just been bullshitting their way around this. They're we're smart, we'll figure it out. This is the Mate version, right? Wait, we're all smart. We're going to figure this shit out, right? Or, we have other alternative ways of distribution. We're going to go direct to consumer. We're going to build our own attribution. We're going to build this. And even Eric Seifert with his Content Fortress bullshit, right? None of that is going to work if the fundamentals of UA are fucking toast, right? So finally, Playtika comes clean and says exactly what everyone's been saying. It's impossible to scale new games in this market. Now,
It's
what I
impossible
would,
for them to scale new games
No,
to market. Of course,
no.
the big companies are fucked. Of course. You know,
that's
okay,
not
sorry.
true.
I will concede. I will concede one thing to you. What I fundamentally think, and we can get to this in a moment, but I'll go back to AppLove and Iron Source in a second. But what I think is that the way people make games has to change. Like the entire industry has to change about what games are made, right? And to your point, that is much harder for bigger companies. So I agree with you on that point. But that doesn't change the fact that like 70 to 80% of the revenue is being generated by social casino, puzzle, strategy, and RPG, which basically are freaking toast, right? Absolutely toast.
But if you look at Huge, they've been growing in the last couple of quarters as well. Like their social casino apps and games.
Let me give let's say
product.
Product
wake up,
here.
wake up, Mr. Jakub.
You
are here as well.
Welcome to the game.
I think this whole thing is just kind of upping the stakes of what you need to do on product rather than on UA, because UA is pretty much becoming adapt or die. Like we talk in like our previous podcast here, that creative strategy now impacts the game themselves. Like let's say we've been covering games that are doing pretty fair in the current market. Like Codes Nike, 84 million in a month. What do you want?
Yeah, what are we talking
15
about?
15 million in 7 weeks. Why not? Frozen
City,
4.5 million in a month. Like where's the problem there? And all of these games are pretty much improving on their product design because their creative strategy is directly impacting their product design. It's just that, as you said, like, games won't be made like they were before. Of course they won't. But if you don't adapt, you die. That's easy. And I don't see a problem for these companies making money in the current market and everybody else whining that, we cannot do the easy thing like we did, let's say, with Machine Zone, where we just reskin 3 times the same game with fucking big UA and it makes money.
That's
okay, but here's the challenge with that assessment of the situation, right? Is that I think you guys are right. I think small players... I think this is a big opportunity for small players to actually make a huge impact in the industry because they will innovate faster than the big players. I do 100% believe you. But if the overall market is shrinking because the majority of the revenue that was generated for the big players continues to decline, that is not a healthy market, right? For investment, like VC investment, equity investments, interest from investors, period, right? So it's going to be harder and harder to find funding to do games when the whole market is in decline. Like that's the way the world works, unfortunately, right? Even though these pockets of players may actually do quite well in the space. But if you look at all the traditional publishers, Supercell, Playrix, Playtika, Zynga, Scopely, EA, Roblox even, Roblox Mobile is a little bit off a little bit, but the Big Fish, all of them are down like 20% year on year in 2022, right? It's not like there's no one that's hiding besides King, you know.
That's also the COVID bump, pretty much.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. Like this is like very unfortunate situation because like COVID ended, like now it's the situation is terrible, economic whatever bullshit, and then you have all these excuses. IDFA, that went away. Now we're fucked because Apple destroyed us.
I 100% disagree. I 100% disagree. This has nothing. There is a tough COVID comp. I'll give you that, right? But that happened much earlier, generally speaking, and then also. The market was growing at like a 20 to 25% average growth rate, and it was down 10% in 2022, right? That's a 33% swing, right? That is not just a COVID bump because the growth was actually relatively similar to the years past in the COVID. It was up like 35 versus 25, right? So fundamentally, the market has moved down 35% in a year, right? And that was right on the cusp of IDFA. And what I've been tracking from a quantitative perspective, both for App Annie or Sensor Tower, whatever the fuck you use, and if you look at the US market in particular to isolate, it's like the downloads are down, right? Downloads continue to go down, right? And not only downloads are down, but yields are down, right? If you look at overall revenue divided by overall downloads, yields are not growing as much as they are because not only are downloads down, but the quality of downloads are down, right? That's kind of the interpretation that I see, and that should continue if what you're talking about is true. If Google comes out with their thing and they remove fingerprinting, like it's just going to get worse and worse and worse for these games in the marketplace and new games that are similar to what's in the marketplace. So
I think
It's
like
bad,
everything
dude.
that's similar in the marketplace is gonna die anyway, because like let's clone the thing and have something similar won't work anymore these days. It worked before, but not now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
So-
now we are talking about these games like Fiona's Farm, when you have like basically free games or game core loops or game loops or whatever vectors you always talk about in
Core
the one in
gameplay.
one game. Yeah, core gameplay in one game. So that's when where the gaming companies
Market
are
is
going
heading.
to move. Yeah. But it will take like more time to actually develop these games, because it's you have free games in one, and then you can use all those core loops in creatives, because that's something that works and kind of like decreases your CPI to a certain extent. And that's how you can actually use that in like on iOS, maybe depends on your monetization strategy, but also like the Google thing, like the privacy sandbox is going to change. Like they kind of still are in slightly different position than iOS, because they're actually working with developers to make it more developer friendly. Nobody
Right,
knows.
right.
Let's see. But
The big
Yeah,
question
but-
is going to be for them how big the nodes are going to be, right? How many people are going to get bunched together, like for the UA campaigns, right? That's a big question that no one knows.
what did you say?
That's what they're going to do, right? Like they're going to be like grouping users together, and you're going to be targeting them like as groups of users instead
I
of
have
individual
no idea.
GID.
I have no idea. I have
Oh,
no
that's
idea.
interesting.
That's what
Yeah,
I've heard at least.
all-
Yeah, that's what I've
yeah,
heard.
I-
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
there you
not.
go.
I'm not as close to this. All I know is that I was confirmed that fidelity was be greatly reduced. That's all I know. That's all I know. And so like that's all I need to know really from my perspective.
No,
If,
thing is like how I look at things now. It's just like what Jakub said. It's not gonna get any easier, because you don't go the easier way anymore. Clone things, use whatever worked before on the UA side. You need to be very much like tech savvy or creative, or try to find different workarounds. That's something that's gonna work, but it's gonna be super hard, of course. And if you have teams or UA teams in big companies, they get these bonuses on day 7 ROAS. Well, of course. Well, if you don't know how to actually measure the day 7 ROAS, then fuck it. They are going to spend the money on the Android rather than
Where's
just
the-
iOS, because
Where's
how
the
it
actual
works.
problem with this? Like old companies that don't adapt gonna die, and new companies gonna rise up. Like where's
Easy.
the problem?
no, the
Oh.
problem is that what I think you guys are inferring is that you're going to basically replace all these high monetization games with low monetization games, right? So you're moving users from strategy games, which make like on average like $25, $30 per user, and then you move that same audience to games that make like $5 per user. That's like not a good thing, right? And if you can't target these whales with the games that they want, that they're willing to spend $25 per user, then it's going to be impossible for the industry to grow,
But
right?
who's
It's going to
saying
just
that-
get more
that-
casual.
That's gonna happen. Like, do you think God Sneak doesn't have atrociously high RPU for that 84 million a month? Like, I guess the DAU is like super low there. Like they still have like super high per player revenue.
Which game are you talking about?
God Sneak.
Goddess of
The
Nike.
waifu
It's
game.
a waifu game,
that,
which
that did like
super
84
big.
million a month.
Yeah, it's really big. It launched in November last year, and it's growing like crazy.
In the West, or is it in Asia?
Everywhere, global.
Basically, I mean, it's majority is Asia, but then US is on
Majority
the top.
Asia, but they have like what?
Yeah, I
20%,
don't-
30%
I
US
honestly-
revenue.
Yeah, what I would do if anybody's doing an analytics around the market, I would only use tier 1 English countries or Europe and North America, because if once you add Japan and Korea and China, then you just get all kinds of warped nonsense that's irrelevant for the market.
Not Japan.
right?
Japan's its own beast, but you know,
Korea is its own beast and China is its own beast.
But it's getting there. It's getting
No,
here.
it's not.
It
What are you
is.
talking about? You think Western companies are competing in China? Dude, they haven't approved a Western
No,
No,
game
they're
in
not
like
competing,
2
but the
years.
gaming
No.
trends are coming here from Asia and being adapted.
No,
in
no,
the
no.
West.
Dude, the mechanics are coming from Asia, not the games. I mean, sorry. Let me state that
Games
back.
are the mechanics.
Games can come from China and do well in the West, right? But those will be captured by looking at the Western revenue, right? But you can't look at China revenue and genre trends or anything that happens in China, Japan, or Korea and glean what's going to happen in the West. Like that's folly, right?
Why not?
So.
Like, you know, Empires
Well,
and
I-
Puzzles, for instance. You take Puzzle and Dragons, the first game that did 1 billion, and Empires and Puzzles is what simplification of that game done by Small Giant, now owned by Zynga. Works like charm in the West.
Okay, but it's still a game. The Puzzle
Like
and
for
Dragons
20
didn't do
billion
shit
a
in the
month.
West.
What?
Puzzle and Dragons didn't do shit. Let's take the best game in Japan, right? The flipping
They
bullshit
reiterated
game.
it, like they add the 4x progression into it.
Yeah.
So, as I said,
But
Right.
again, track that game. Don't track Puzzles and Dragons. Like that game is not going to. That particular execution is not going to do well in the West.
but guess what Small Giant currently has in soft launch? A Japanese
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
That's not smart. That's what I'm
Why?
trying to
It
tell
worked
you.
for them before.
Why so smart? Yeah, it worked. It worked really well. Well, they took Puzzle and Dragons and then they made Empires and Puzzles.
Yeah,
they just
exactly.
simplified. Yeah,
But
and how's that? That's not
what
working?
that's what worked in the West, not Puzzles and Dragons, right? You can't.
But you don't.
You
take
can
things
design
one-to-one
things
from
based on
Japan
mechanics
content.
and gameplay that can translate, but like what I'm trying to tell you is that you can't look at what's successful in Japan and Korea. Like let's say for instance like MMOs, right? Like
Mhm.
Lineage 2, which was like the biggest game in Korea for like years, right? That
Lineage
game,
is
every
a
single
religion in
every single
Korea.
execution of that game that came to the West has failed miserably.
Because
absolutely
Lineage is a religion in South Korea. That's a different thing there.
Exactly. And so is Monster Strike. Monster Strike from that stupid flip game, dude. That game
Mixi.
didn't do shit in the West.
Mix-
They still mint money with that game.
Yeah, they make 1 billion
Japan.
a year in Japan all the time.
Dude, it's amazing. But you
Yeah,
want to
I
build
like-
that game? Why don't we just build that game for the West? Oh, that should work, right? Right? Is that what you're going to work on next? Let's build a Mixie game where you're flipping
Actually,
bullshit. Up.
like a Czech company built that game, and it was making like $500,000 a month here.
and yeah, they were required by uploading afterwards.
Yeah.
Of course. But
Yes, and again, bad, not a good strategy, right? I mean, is this in debate, right?
well, it depends on like if some gaming teams even $500,000 for them is kind of nice money. Honestly,
Yeah, but
of course.
Sorry,
but it's not yet.
I there's a
the
certain
macro level,
materiality
that's nothing, yeah.
threshold. Yeah, that
Yeah.
we have to
Yeah.
work with, right?
True,
I
true,
think for me, like if it doesn't make $100 million, I'm not really all that interested. I mean, that's like the bar, right? I don't know.
like
That's
a-
what makes it material for
Yeah.
publicly
Yeah,
traded
sure, of
names,
course.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
You know.
Like Empires and Puzzles makes 20 million a month.
Sure.
It's a
Okay.
great game
It
for
is.
the West. How much does that make in Asia? Actually, that one might actually do okay in Asia.
So are
Yeah.
we done bashing on Unity and AppLovin? We kind of just skipped ahead of that and then we went down a rabbit
No,
hole.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Got
sorry.
a little bit sidetracked.
Yeah.
Well, basically, fundamentally, I think they've been gaslighting industry as well as investors, which I've said for months, years, forever.
So for
And the other
example,
thing that
AppLovin
bothered-
revenue guidance is up, right? Like they increased their revenue guidance for this quarter.
Yeah. Good luck with that. They're going to fail. Like they're ultimately going to fail. So, sorry, I don't want to get too deep into this like rabbit hole. It's like the manipulation on Wall Street about different types of things. You know, like trying to. What I think they're trying to do is juice up the stock so that they can sell it, right? Because I don't think I think Adam, the CEO, whatever his name is not interested in running this company anymore, right? It's like it's too painful, right? He knows he's one of the smartest guys in the space. Like he knows exactly what's happening out here, right? And I think that's what they're trying to likely do is try to get a sale of this thing. They're going to sell it for parts. This is one of my predictions is that he's going to sell it for parts, like sell all the gaming stuff to the aggregators like Stillfront or Embracer, who's buying crap anyway, right? And then sell the ad tech to something else. Just get rid of make KKR whole, right? Because the KKR guys are still really fully invested in this. So I think that's what's likely going to happen. But I don't know. My problem with these companies again is that they've been misleading, right? They've been basically using a couple things. One, they've been using AppLovin has been using revenue from their gaming sector as a proxy for SaaS revenue for ad tech, right? And that has led them to these insane valuations in which they were trading at like 8 to 10 times. No, I think it was like 20 times revenue at one point, right? And now they're trading at nothing, right? I mean, they're basically almost,
They went from 80 billion, I think, in market cap to like about 8. So yeah.
Yeah, and they're not worth that, right? Honestly, like, so that's one thing. So they misled investors. The other thing is that it's not really SaaS revenue. When you talk about ad tech, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong here, is like the smart UA people go where the returns are, right? So there's no like loyalty to a platform.
No.
right?
No.
Like when you buy
Yeah, zero.
AWS server or Azure, you're a fucking client, right? That's software as a service that's sticky, right? I mean, it's hard to move, from one service to another. So I don't think ad tech is the same thing in that way, right? And then the other big thing, the obvious thing now with IDFA is that you're not in control of your own platform, right? Like you are at the mercy of Apple and Google for what happens to your whole system, right? That is not a defendable position, right? Because as I said earlier, the platforms don't give a shit, right, about you, right? And so, and actually, in essence, and the reason I got so negative on AppLovin and Iron Source and Unity like 2 years ago when I started ranting about this on the podcast is that Apple in particular fucking hates these guys. They hate them. And that's why they hate hyper casual and they hate social casino because they've lost control of their stores, right? They've lost control of the traffic to their stores because these guys are manipulating the system in order to like drive traffic and generate bullshit revenue, right? And they don't like that. And so the fact that these platforms don't like them, that's when they were ultimately going to fail, right? They were going to do things against them. And so that's why they're also not a software as a service because they're not in control of their own platform like Google is with Microsoft is with Azure and Amazon and AWS. So, and then the one thing about Unity that drives me insane, John Mercantile, I worked with him at EA for a while. The guy is a brilliant salesperson, right? But he basically claimed that Unity was going to be a platform of choice. A 3D engine was going to be a platform of choice for all things mobile. Like it was basically going to go to every single vertical in the world would be using Unity at one point. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's an interactive platform, right? It's a 3D engine for fuck's sake. And it's an amazing one, but no one cares about it outside of gaming or interactive, right? It has no future anywhere else. And so that was absolute gaslighting. He knew that wasn't true, but he says it in order to sell the story, right? And so their core business doesn't make sense, although that is actually a SaaS service, right? It's a great platform, but it's not going to go to healthcare. It's not going to go to auto. It's not going to go to fucking banking. Come on. You think like Wells Fargo is going to make a 3D app? I mean, it's bullshit, right? It's still nonsense, right? But that's the kind of claim he was making during the IPO process, which people like hook, line, and sinker believed it, but that's just nonsense from the very beginning. So
do you have any, like, if these like three are the ones that you bash on the most, or like two now, I guess, like, do you have any darlings, like people that you like, companies that you're like?
I love Activision, EA, Nintendo, even Ubisoft. I think is actually looking pretty good right now. What other ones do I like? I would buy all the Asian names, NetEase, Tencent, right now, because I think that they're going to all recover. And Sony. I mean, I'm really bullish on the console cycle. So I think anything that's related to that, Epic, right? I think Epic's in an interesting position right now. I mean, you can't buy that publicly, but I like the way Epic is moving in the direction of like competing against Roblox with a real HD type metaverse thing. So yeah, there's lots of things going on in the space that are positive. It's just there's a lot of things that have just been
but you're not talking about those.
No. Well, like, look, VR is dead again, right? Web3, dude, blockchain, forget Web3, forget blockchain stuff. Like, ooh, that's scary as shit right now.
Stick a stick in his heart, yeah.
Yeah, and then AR is nowhere, right? So there's a lot of things that like got a lot of hype over the last few years that just are just not panning out right now. But in the future, 5-10 years from now, when I'm long retired, maybe, right? I mean, VR in particular is like, I think that's a 15 to 20 year type thing. I don't even think that's even 5 to 10 now. I think we're just
too much technology hurdles there that we still need to solve.
Yeah, until you can like plug in from the back of your head, or you put on glasses that beam shit into your eyes, like there's just no way. Or someone creates some like amazing social experience that's going to cost $1 gajillion to make. I just don't see VR taking off in any meaningful way. But that's a whole other conversation.
What do you think is the kind of endpoint where mobile will get to eventually, especially if we look at iOS? It's just losing of the dominance, and they basically have to give up the store and side loading.
Well, I think there's a few people talk about people. Yeah. a few things people talk about is creating your own store or
Oh yeah, sure.
getting
That's easy.
yeah, exactly. getting like Playtika and others are Scopely, for instance, are doing getting their whales onto their web stores, which helps like margins at least. But
they're
it's still
doing that
like,
for years. They're doing that for years.
I know, and so that helps the margin story, but that doesn't help the revenue growth story because you still have to fucking acquire users, right? I mean, anyway, so like a lot of these are just meaning helpful in kind of mitigating the issues right now. The one thing that is interesting to me is just totally blanked. Oh, the 30% fee, right? So like I've been railing against this for like forever, but the 30% fee is ridiculous, right? Apple provides absolutely no fucking value.
You're getting
at
nothing.
all.
Yeah, nothing back.
Their store is a joke. Organics is a joke. Their services are a joke, right? We were talking about this on the podcast yesterday. I was like, dude, they don't Game Center. Like, what the fuck? Why didn't they build something with Game Center? They could have made something amazing, right? That's what Apple. That's what Microsoft and Sony do on the consoles, right? Anyway, they've done nothing to justify that. And there's a guy, Neil Long. Do you know him? I don't know.
Yeah, we know Neil. Yeah, we know Neil.
He's out there like coming clean, like this insider has been finally saying what I've been saying for the last like 4 years, right? It's like he's my new favorite right now. I'm gonna try to get him on the podcast, but
yeah, but you need to say his website right because he said it's mobilegamer.biz.
I've given enough airplay, frankly. Anyway, I'm talking to him tomorrow, actually.
Nice.
What was I trying to say? Oh, so I think. So if that 30% is reduced, like that's interesting, right? Yeah. But then again, like
take away the IDFA, reduced,
all the costs associated with like running your own store and doing all that transaction stuff, and then like you're gonna likely throw all that money back into marketing anyway because you can't acquire users profitably anymore. So it's like, is that really going to be a boon to the industry? Yes, but it's going to be offset by costs associated with it, I think. So the answer to your question is I've been thinking about this a lot and kind of like trying to model it out. As long as we see downloads continue to deteriorate, the revenue is going to deteriorate, right?
Yeah.
And if the quality of downloads continues to deteriorate, then the revenue deteriorates. So I see like at least 2 more years of 5 to 10% declines in the Western markets. And then what I'm hoping is that people start to figure out that you have to do things differently. And I'm happy to talk about what I think they should do differently, but like, they have to make games differently, and that is obviously what takes a lot more time. And I'm sure Jacob would agree with that.
Of course,
hyper casual mechanics in the onboarding,
yes.
And then
we got to get to the hyper casual shit, dude. We got to talk about that.
Yeah. So one quick comment: we don't work with hyper casuals, honestly.
Yeah, I don't give a fuck. Hyper casual clients, Eric.
I don't give a fuck, honestly. Of course, like that genre is gonna change. And whatever worked last year, or even a few months ago, it doesn't work anymore, and that's okay. Hybrid casual, whatever, maybe. But in terms of like painting the picture that because of IDFA and because of Google interstitial policies, they are dead. It's like it's not only that case. Like it's just like that's totally wrong. That picture is not as what I would say or paint. That's not, man.
The whisper happening on the street is that Voodoo is still earning somewhere between 700 to 900K a day in ads. So like, still massive revenues.
So the thing is, like the downloads kind of like for hyper casual games are stagnating for last year and a half in US. So they're not growing. Sure, of course. But like since Google implemented their policy against these intrusive interstitials, almost nothing changed for the big guys. It changed for these like small speculative developers that are trying to make a lot of money in a short period of time until they get banned.
Oh, this is the Eric Seifert stuff, right?
Yeah,
this is not me. I don't know.
I know it's not you. I know it's. But you always agree with Eric. It's like, oh yeah, sure. You don't know about anything about this, right? So it's like, come on. Why would you agree?
No, it goes back to my original point: is that everyone fucking hates hyper casual on the platform side, and so therefore it can't survive, right? And so, like, which is funny because I still think hyper casual is terrible business, right? It is like the lowest of the low, right? You know, it's like it's bottom feeding at its finest, right? And advertising generally is that way, but this is the worst, right?
Well, Felix
so,
thinks that the ads are beautiful. So
ads are beautiful.
Yeah, you guys have been in the muck too long. You know, that's the problem. It's like you gotta wipe that stuff off. You know. But anyway, so if but what's interesting is that it's evolving, right?
Yeah.
And so now they're adding monetization within this,
Yeah.
and so what's funny is the market is moving towards hyper casual. So because I think the mass market gameplay of hyper casual is going to be one of those things that sells well or does well from a user acquisition perspective.
Exactly.
It's going to increase the funnel, right? And so now, again, moving to that direction. However, it's not the advertising that's going to be effective in those new games. It's going to be the monetization. So if they add the monetization into these games and have the top of the funnel that's high, then those games can be successful. I think, you know, Survivor.io is like one of those type of games that may make sense in this brave new world in which you can't acquire, you know, whales anymore.
There is very much not lightweight the monetization, man.
Survivor.io has spent that of like multiple K. Like,
No,
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. No, sorry, I misspoke. What I'm saying is you build hyper casual game, or you build casual gameplay that attracts the broadest users, and you build deep monetization within those games. Like that's the key to success going forward at a high level. And I think Survivor.io does that very well, right?
Yeah, but Survivor.io is pretty much upgraded version of Archero, where they just improve the gameplay, where they cut like the blank spaces there and just goes on and on. But the thing is that it's based on unfolding gameplay. That's really interesting. Unfolding gameplay means that it looks first few minutes like a hyper casual, then a new feature pops up, new feature unlocks, so on and so forth, and there's suddenly 20 buttons.
It's fucking
in
hardcore.
UI.
That is the lesson that needs to be learned. That's what that's what I'm suggesting. And ironically, this was the same strategy that Kevin Chu had at Kabam like 10 years ago, right? He's like, we want to build mass market gameplay with deep monetization design. And back then, I was like kind of poo-pooing the idea. I'll be honest. I was like, look, this doesn't make sense given what's doing well in the market, like strategy games, casino games, et cetera, that are geared towards whales, right? That spend $100,000 or some insane amount of money on this stuff. Like, I understand where you're coming from the perspective of getting better users, but that's not where the market was, right? But now the market is there in a sense, because if you can't target the whales, if you can't get these guys into your game, then you need to have more broader net, but you also need to be able to monetize the people that want to monetize, right?
But games are doing this from the bold phase actually, whereas here we would start from hyper casual, unfolding core, where it seems like hyper casual, then it entwines into like very, very big and deep game. But also the other games, for instance, 4X, they are building a hyper casual core on top of the 4X, where they don't show you the 4X core at all for like 3 days, and then suddenly it switches into 4X.
Yeah. So we have Kingdom Guard, we have Top War. They're starting basically. Kingdom Guard is like tower defense, and then suddenly after 15 minutes of gameplay, bam, you're in the 4X. Yeah. Well, out of nowhere.
I have to, even though I think it's and now I understand your question. I didn't understand it when I read it before. I think that's actually brilliant, right? That is a way to circumvent the problem that Activision has. Oh, sorry, Activision. The problem that Apple has caused, right? You know, I think that that makes a lot of sense.
That's the thing that I told you in the beginning, that you need to learn this kind of a new know-how, how to build games, and those who don't, they die and don't adapt. That's it.
Yeah. You know, they're taking a lot of inspiration from the hyper-casual genre, actually, which is obviously like how you can decrease the CPS quite heavily. And even if you don't build those hyper-casual mechanics in the game, then you can use it still in the creatives, and even that kind of decreases the CPI quite heavily. And they said, if you broaden up the funnel, then you have a higher chance of actually getting a lot more paying users afterwards.
Yeah, you can always lie in your ads, right, Manche?
Yeah,
exactly.
Just you're digging deeper into the muck, huh?
Yeah,
I mean, just go for it. Why not? And then the other thing I would say from a perspective is branding is becoming more, I think, valuable than it has in the past. Like I think Marvel, the only 3 games that were really successful last year, in my estimation anyway, was Diablo, Marvel, and Survivor.io. And Diablo obviously is a huge brand.
Chinese market, Diablo.
Yeah, that's They're doing
Well,
quite well in
no,
Asia.
but it actually did well, much better in the West than I thought it was going to do. Honestly.
Yeah, okay, I can agree with that.
But again, the point is, it's a mass market gameplay in the sense that it's an action RPG, which is actually not as mass as Survivor.io, but it's still something that's very friendly to people. But the monetization design, and this is where I was wrong, was that the monetization design in the end game is what is really deep and crazy. And I never thought that Blizzard would do that. Now, the early monetization is relatively low.
But that's
And then-
NetEase doing that, not Blizzard,
Yeah,
I would say.
100%. Yeah. Blizzard had nothing to do with that game.
No, of course,
clearly.
yeah.
And actually, NetEase is no longer going to support that game, is my understanding. So it's basically going to die.
No, that's a separate contract, if I understand. Like the latest
That is fucking bullshit, right?
Really?
It is a separate contract, but NetEase is so burned on this. Like,
yeah,
there's
they're
no
super
way. Do you know that the egos of these executives, the CEO, it's like it's like these megalomaniac narcissists. Do you think they're going to support a game after being completely destroyed and shunned for their major contract? Fuck off, they're done.
Never gonna happen.
Yeah. So, what was I going to say? Oh, so anyway, Diablo's done well, and then Marvel Snap is a great example of something else too. Like these guys didn't do as much onerous on a monetization design, which I think was a mistake, but that's up to debate. But they created more of a mass market, card game with absolutely the biggest IP in the world, and that game's done quite well. It continues to do well.
I think that the problem there kind of stems from the notion that they wanted to avoid being seen as predatory, free to play, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
no
usual
ads.
thing they could, no ads. Felix wasn't happy.
It's horrible.
But in the
Not
end,
even a rewarded ad.
like it will bite them in the ass later down the line because their card collection mechanic, how they're adding new cards into the pool, it's like actually going even worse than gacha because you won't be able to. acquire the
Here we
new
have
cards
Mr.
anyway.
Gacha Pool.
Yeah,
and
Harm's
amazing.
always a gacha pool.
it's problematic, but the gameplay and the core gameplay that they did there, like hands down, like one of the best games of last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I know. Okay. I mean, this was kind of nice.
So
I
we solved
expected a
mobile.
lot more,
So we
lot
solved
more
mobile.
insults. And hyper casual as well.
I didn't even bring up the nasty man bun for Mr.
Ooh,
Felix.
Nasty.
Yeah.
I watched this
Yeah.
today just for
Dude.
you. Look at this.
Don't release it. Please don't release it.
Oh,
yeah, he will-
I'll release
he
it in
will.
Istanbul for you when I
Istanbul,
see
yeah,
you next
100%.
week. Yeah.
I can't take
That-
it. I can't take it.
Yeah, it's happening for sure.
I won't be happy until he cuts it all off. Maybe when he's passed out drunk at a bar in Istanbul, I'll get out the scissors and chop it the fuck
Yeah.
off.
I would end you.
Oh, that's his
Dude,
signature.
Yeah, but the thing, that would benefit your whole vibe, dude. The women would be flocking at the man bun.
Well, it's funny because now when Eric talks about our podcast, it's Mate and the man bun guy, and Jakub doesn't even exist, so it's okay. No, it's fun.
I didn't. Sorry, I haven't listened
do you
to the
ever,
podcast.
do you ever
in a
think,
while.
Maciej, like where you'd be in your career if Americans could pronounce your name?
Correctly. Oof.
Yeah.
No, but finally finally getting there.
Why don't you just change your name for the Americans?
Yeah, I should. I was. Yeah,
Jake,
it was actually
you're a
when-
good Jake. Jake.
Yeah, I'm Matt.
Yeah.
Matthew. I'm usually
Yeah,
Matthew.
Matt.
No, I'm usually
that- see,
Matthew
now-
in the US.
I'm calling you, dude. I'm calling you Matthew from now on the podcast. So
Nice.
that actually works.
Yeah, that works
Um,
better. It's easier, but it's it's Mate, so it's good.
All right,
Okay, yeah,
I'm gonna have to.
Yeah.
I want to ask one more question to you guys
Okay,
as experts in the UA space. So, how bad do you think these things get for like AppLovin and Iron Source and Unity going forward? Do you think they can adjust, or you think they're just DOA? And do you think their demise actually helps Facebook and Snap or anybody else?
Well, Snap is dead, so we can forget about Snap already. But Facebook, that's gonna help Facebook for sure. TikTok is a big question mark because of all the US fun stuff that is happening at the moment. But this is definitely going to help Facebook. Facebook is in very shitty position in the last 2 years. It's
Right.
really, really bad. So I guess this would help. And in that case, like Unity, Iron Source, Apple, I mean, it's going to look like Facebook is looking now, which is very bad.
Okay, all right. I'm actually a little bit shocked more that we were on the same page on most of the stuff. I thought we were going to be arguing a little bit more because, again, like from the gaslighting perspective, I think people were just like, the things are fine. We'll adjust. We'll figure this stuff out. But it's been far more painful.
That's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I'm always, I guess, more positive on the iOS side than the rest of the industry. But it's like I work with mid-sized and small-sized companies, and they're flexible, agile. They can adjust whatever is happening. Of course, like if I would be working with Zynga or Playtika or whoever, like that would be really, really hard to actually turn that ship around. I completely agree with that. But it's like this doesn't, mean that everybody's fucked, basically. But yeah, well.
It'll be interesting to see what happens when fingerprinting gets pulled. Like that will be an overnight shock, and we'll see what happens.
Overnight show, not shock. Like you
shock
need
show.
to grab your
I'll
popcorn.
get the popcorn ready.
You need to grab the popcorn. That's it. No, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be always fun.
All right, guys. Well, we will see you in Istanbul next week. I'm excited. Should be fun.
Yeah.
You guys staying at the same hotel and all that? We're gonna be good.
Of course. Yeah. And I think we are gonna have like an unofficial game developer gathering, because everybody who asked me like where I'm staying, I sent this hotel. So it's gonna be
it's gonna be planned. Marriott.
Most probably, most probably, yes. Yeah.
Well, I'll be there. I think on Tuesday.
So I'll see you there. I arrive on Tuesday as well.
Yeah, Wednesday to Friday. So Wednesday, I will see you there, guys. This was fun. Thank you very much for coming. And also, listeners, thank you very much for listening. Please keep subscribing. The podcast is growing like crazy. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye now.